Let's face it, we've got a brand new idea and we want to build a brand new app. The first thought is not typically security, but really it should be. We have bots, we have SQL injection attacks, we have cross-site scripting. All of these things can feel really quickly overwhelming. But what if I told you that there's a very simple way with a single tool to simplify all of this? Today I'm going to introduce you to Arcjet. Arcjet is a really handy tool that I personally use in a lot of my projects to go ahead and enforce a bunch of different security protocols so I can protect my app from unwanted misuse. Today you're going to learn how to protect yourself from things like SQL injection attacks, cross-site scriptings, common web attacks, as well as bot detection. So maybe we want to allow things like Google web scrapers to scrape the website, but if we don't want to allow any other kind of bot, I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can go ahead and reject that. For example, we only want to allow legitimate browser requests. Perfect, human traffic's allowed. However, if I was to send this request from a terminal, it will block it because that's a bot essentially sending that request. We're also going to cover rate limiting. Now, rate limiting is a very powerful security technique. Essentially, what it means is we limit the amount of requests that a user can send to a server at a given time. For example, if we want to say you can only send 5 requests every 10 minutes, that can essentially stop somebody from maybe misusing a sign-up form, trying to reserve a certain number of tickets on a ticket website, as you might have seen in my previous build, and so many more use cases. And also, how do we go ahead and add dynamic elements, such as if the user's logged in, maybe we are more generous with the number of requests that they can send. And we also may want to know where the user is making the request from, because we may want to block certain users from accessing it. For example, if we only wanted members of the UK to access the website, we can go ahead and block it in that way. So here you can see, for example, a little request. We can go ahead and make a request. And as you can see, after 4 requests, I've run out of tokens. It's about to refill. But what if I make a 5th request? Boom, we get a 429. And it also knows that I'm in the United Arab Emirates. So I'm going to show you how to implement all of this super easy. We're also going to cover sensitive information. How can you go ahead and protect simple forms from, accidentally slipping information? Think of chat rooms, for example, where you might not want things like email addresses or card numbers or phone numbers to be shared. Pretty simple example here. If we have some safe content, you can see it passes our security check. But if, let's say, for example, someone went ahead and included a message like this, and as you can see, sensitive information was detected, a phone number, an email address. Think about things like Upwork, where they go ahead and detect if the chat members are actually trying to send over their personal details to get away from Upwork. Things like that, right? This is how you can go ahead and detect it super simply. All of this is covered again by Arcjet. And one of the final and most important things that we want to go ahead and protect our website against is sign-up protections. This could be a combination of things. It could be rate limiting the number of sign-up attempts. It could be preventing bots from signing up. It could be even down to email validation, to the degree where we do not want like temporary email addresses to be signed up. So lots of spam accounts tend to use this approach, and this can result in your website being flooded with fake users, which can cause a massive issue security wise. So if we had a valid email, we can go ahead and click on the test sign up, and as you can see, sign up is allowed. Business email, sign up is allowed. But what if we did disposable emails, maybe an invalid format, or we had missing MX records behind it? How would you even check that without doing some complicated coding in the back end or, figuring it all out? Well, in this case, if we would simply go ahead and click it, you can see, boom, it finds out those issues straight off the bat, disposable emails as well, and invalid formats as well. So super simple. And in addition to all of this, guys, if we were to go ahead and sign up, for example, with a real email, basically we want to test the rate limit here. What I'm doing here is I'm sending consecutive rate limit requests. And as you can see, after a certain point, it's going to stop the user because you're misusing the website. You're basically attacking it in a way that's going to cause it to eventually crash. Imagine you had millions of users doing this attack. It can cause your website a lot of unwanted traffic. So you want to rate limit them in a certain way. All of this is super simple. I've given you all of the code and I'm going to explain it all. And it's simply a few lines of code to get everything working. Now, I will mention that this video is sponsored by Arcjet, so you can sign up in the link in the description, and that will, of course, help the channel out. However, I'm going to mention I personally use this on my own projects. The reason being, it's so simple. And also the free tier has such an incredible amount of use cases. You can have up to 5 different rules. And as you saw before, those 5 rules cover pretty much everything that we want to do. So at this point, if you need to include those features inside of your pet projects and you don't want to have to go ahead and implement them all in a custom way, this is a really good solution to go ahead and get set up really quickly and simply. And it works with Next.js 15, middleware, API routes, all of the good stuff that we know and love. It also works across the number of different tech stacks. So whether you're like me and you love Next.js, or whether you're venturing off into the distances, that's up to you. You can go ahead and use your tech stack that you prefer. So you've seen the tech, but what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a really interactive demo, which you can go ahead and get right now by heading over to the GitHub repo. So if you head simply over to the GitHub repo, you will see this in the description down below. So you want to go over here, simply clone this onto your machine. So do a git clone on here and you'll simply get access to it. It's completely free, so you can go ahead and get access to it right now. They also have a very, very good website example on their website, Arcjet demo, and you can go ahead and deploy it with one click. You can feel free to check that out, but I made my own example to go ahead and really dive into the depth of it so we can do this together, right? So I want you to go ahead and git clone that into your repo. Once you've done that, I'm going to go ahead and just pull this on the screen right now. So as you can see, we have our app up and running. Okay, now simple checks, right? So I want to go ahead and as I demo through the app, I'm not going to run through every single implementation because the guys over at Arcjet have actually done a great job of having some amazing documentation themselves. So if you simply head over to the docs, you will see we've got welcome to Arcjet. And then we've got Next.js. If we click this, you can basically start off with this. So this is how we simply set up a Next.js app. We can go ahead and install Arcjet into our project. You see they do support 15. You set up your key. So you're going to need to create a free Arcjet account. So I have an account right here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you right now. Here I have an account. And as you can see, I can see all of the different things which have been, the requests coming into the website. And I can see this one was rate limited. I can click into it. I can see the reasons why. What version of Next we're using and so forth. If I go into my, homepage and click on new site. So I've already done this, but if I click on new site, we can go ahead and give it a simple site name. So I'm just going to say demo YouTube site. So let's go ahead and say demo YouTube site, click on create. And you've also got some examples here, but let's go ahead and click on create. Once that's done, we will get a secure API key. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and click over here. And as you can see, you're going to click to copy. Now, once you've copied the API key, I want you to go over to the GitHub repo that I gave you. And in the m.example file, you just want to copy this. I've already done it here. And you want to basically rename this file to m.local. Okay, now I've already done that, so I'm not going to do this step. And what I want you to do is in your m.local, you're simply going to go ahead and replace this with the value that we got in this a second ago. So the value that I have here is this one here, Arcjet key, right? So you want to go ahead and simply replace that in like so. So you want to go ahead and swap that in. Once you've done that, you've essentially connected it up to your app. And obviously this is a secret key, so you do not want to expose this. Hence why we do not have Next public, okay? So once that's done, we basically go ahead and we've got the connection between our Next.js app and our Arcjet app set up. The next step is going ahead and initializing it. Now, in their documentation, they show you a bunch of approaches and methods here. I'm going to show you how I recommend to implement it, so that way we can benefit from some really cool features that they offer. One of which means that basically if we create a shared instance of the Arcjet client, what this will do is it will use some very powerful shared decision logic. So what that means is, let's say, for example, you had some suspicious activity come from a single client. It will remember that when it makes the second decision. This allows you to essentially stop people who are essentially suspicious from making further requests. So that way they don't misuse it and try and play against the system, right? So heading back over to our code, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I recommend we set this up. So if you look in the lib folder, all we have is an arcjet.ts file. Now, as you can see here, we've got the Arcjet import. We've got the instance that we're going to create. Now, this is our base instance. As you can see, there are no rules being applied here. Now, what do we mean by rules? Well, rules are essentially the things that we want to check against, okay? So Arcjet has a number of different rules. As you can see here in the features tab, we've got bot protection, rate limiting, shield, which prevents things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, a number of the OWASP 10 top security risks is pretty much covering, email validation, sign-up form protection, and sensitive information. But let's click in bot protection, for example, click on quick start. And as you can see, it's giving us a Next.js example. So you can go ahead and look at this. The rules here is how we would go ahead and add it in. So we have two modes, live and dry run. We're going to use live because we actually want to block the request if it is, for example, a bot, right? And we've got the second bit, which is allow. Right, so here you can do allow and deny. In this case, we have certain big categories such as, search engine, which allows things like search engine crawlers like Google, Bing. Those kind of bots we typically allow because they are going to come into our website, actually help people get to our website because it's going to scrape our site and then it's going to essentially allow people to find it when they try and search for our site, right? So that's one example. And then we also have other, different bots like uptime monitoring services, link previews. So if you were ever having a Slack link preview, for example, you would want to make sure that you allow that. Otherwise, it would deny the request. And once you've done that, you can pretty much get it running fairly straightforward. Now, I do want to mention that this is an example of how we can implement it in the middleware in Next.js. Right now, if you do put it in the middleware, what's going to happen is that every single request that goes through your application, this will go ahead and apply the Arcjet client against it. Now, what does that mean? For example, if I have this set up right here, what this will be doing is every single request that goes through our Next.js app, it will go ahead and basically only allow search engine bots to pass through. If any other bot is detected, it will go ahead and say, nope, this is not allowed to happen, and it will give them a 403 forbidden error. We can go ahead and handle that, and we can add custom logic and everything as well. But this is a very simple example of middleware. Now, you can do it this way, but I've gone ahead and implemented it in a more granular fashion. So we can actually customize it based on what route we're in. So let's dive into our code. Here we have our base instance where we're basically initializing our Arcjet client. And as you can see, something I want you to pay attention to is the characteristics. Now, IP.src is one of the default, basically, identifiers for our Arcjet client. Now, what does a characteristic mean? Essentially, think of this part as like a fingerprint. So every time we initialize an Arcjet client, for every person, we need to identify who is that person? Because otherwise, how do we track the security protocols around each individual, right? If somebody is suspicious, how do we know that person A is different from person B? Well, in this case, this will go ahead and use the IP. The problem, however, with just using IP can be spoofed in many ways. You can have VPNs, you can have tunneling processes like ngrok, lots of different things can happen here. So what you can actually do is you can add tons of different custom things such as a user ID and so forth. And then you can actually make this a joint composite key, essentially, basically where it will combine the IP of the user plus the user ID if they were signed in, for example, and then that would go ahead and create their fingerprint, more so to say, right? But in this case, we're just going to stick to simple IP to get the demo going. Now, let's go ahead and look at our first example here. So if we were to take a look at the actual demo website, I'm going to pull it up right now. So in this case, we've got our demo website here. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up Shield WAF protection, right? So if we go ahead and see this, now I've created this page to go ahead and make it as simple as possible for you to go ahead and get this working. Now, if we look at the actual Shield demo, now I'm not going to go over all of the code. So if you want to look at all of the demos, they are inside here. So you can see on this page, we have the Shield page, and you can basically see this is all of the logic to get this on the screen. Now, the more important part is what we have here. So what I'm trying to do here is show you that if we were to make several requests from the same IP, what we can implement is something called a sliding window, for example, right? So if I was to go into the API and show you the Shield route, here you can see an example. Now what I've done is I've very heavily commented it to go ahead and demonstrate what is going on, so you can get a full breakdown of everything and how it works, and then that way you can go ahead and repurpose this for your own content. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the Arcjet instance on the right hand side, so you can see this is the single instance which every single route is going to use. Okay, so if we go here, you can see we pull from our library, so this is going to get the shared Arcjet instance. And then you can see here, we've got the get function. So every time we make a request to this endpoint, which is, our API/Arcjet/shield, and it doesn't have to be that, you can be whatever you want it to be. But you can see here is what we end up doing. So what we do is we say, take the base Arcjet instance and apply a rule. And you can stack these rules, by the way. You can say with rule, and then I can have another with rule, and you can keep on doing it. And then in this case, we have two rules here that we're applying. One is the shield. Right now, if we were to look at the documentation and we see the shield, we can see that if we look at concepts, you can get a breakdown of what the shield is doing. So you can see it's going to stop against SQL injection, cross-site scripting, local file inclusion, and a bunch of other things, right? As well as, for example, the rate limiting. So if we look at the concepts here, you can see we've got lots of different rate limiting, including like, blocking based on fingerprint. We have sliding windows and a bunch of other stuff. So that's where you can go ahead and revise or look what's going on. But here is where I want to show you what we're essentially doing. So we're applying a shield, which basically enforces all of the shield protection that we talked about before, which actively enforces all the shield protection I just showed you. And then we're applying a second rule, which is a fixed window. Now, what does a fixed window essentially do? It means that at most in a 60-second window, you can make 5 requests. And what this will do is, imagine somebody has a bot set up where they're basically attacking the website, right? So like a DDoS style approach. We will basically rate limit them. So every 60 seconds, the most damage they could ever do is 5 requests to our website. And then we do protect requests. That is all you need to do. All I have here is essentially some logging to show you what is being resulted out and the overall impact of it. So what I want you to do is simply run the app. So I'm already running the app on the left-hand terminal. So in this case, I'm going to cancel it just to show you npm run dev, and this will spin up our app. And then what I want you to do is in a separate terminal. So I've got another terminal here. Ignore this one. I want you to go ahead and run the following command. So inside of the demo, what you'll see is we have this, a suspicious IP request, right? And what we're doing here is we're identifying it based on this header. So if we go ahead and we simply copy that, and I've got a little bit of explanation down here if you're wondering how it all works. Let's go ahead and paste this in. And what you'll see now is it tries to make a request. And as you can see, look, it says allow, right? So it basically hit that request and it says request passed security checks. So if we were looking at that route, you can see it went through. So all the security checks passed, it allowed the request. And all of those logging things that I spoke about before, you can see it went through. And the decision that the security Arcjet client made was, it's all good. This does not break any of the checks that we have, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and attack this in a few ways. So like 3, 4, and if I try and do a 5th one now, I believe the 5th one goes through, but let's do one more. And as you can see, security threat detected, right? And it says type shield triggered true, right? Now, as you can see, if we look at the log down here, the raw result shows us why was it rejected. And as you can see, the reason was it was rate limited. There was a max number of 5 attempts. And as you can see, we have no more remaining, and then you get a reset time. This reset time, you can give it back to the front end. You can do whatever you want to do with it to basically say, okay, you can only make a request after this time, right? So this essentially is how we go ahead and protect our website against this. So as you can see, it's as simple as that to go ahead and get protection on our website. And we've also got a bunch of other examples. We've got bot detection. In this case, let's look at bot detection. I'm going to run through each one fairly quickly so you can see how you can use them, and then I'll let you decide how you want to implement them in your app. But here we have another example where we send a test request. Now this one is basically sending a normal request to our backend. So if we were to look at the code over here, let's have a look right now. So we already know that, we're using a shared Arcjet instance, but if we look at the API for bot detection, let's have a look at this right now. Okay, as you can see here, it's a simple GET request. And again, all we're doing here is we're using our Arcjet client and we're saying with the rule of detect bot. And here we're not allowing any bots to go through. Okay, what you could do here is you could go ahead and say, you see, we've got a nice little IntelliSense here. We could go ahead and say category. And as you can see, like I mentioned before, you can say only allow Google, only allow all of the search engines and so forth. You can really go, whatever you need. It's very customizable. But in this case, we're just saying no, absolutely no bots are allowed through. And then it's basically very simple. We can tap into the decision and we can say, here, you can see if I go ahead and do dot, we can say is allowed, is challenged, is denied, is errored. And you can get all of the kind of logic as to why the decision was made. So you can go ahead and inform the user correctly based on what happened. And as you can see here, if it was denied, bot traffic detected, and then we give the reason back to the front end, right? Else it will say human traffic allowed. So in the demo that I just showed you, if we go ahead and do this, it says human traffic allowed. Now let's go ahead and simulate a bot. So in this case, a bot would essentially be from a terminal. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So over here, I'm in a terminal and I simply paste that command and I hit enter. And as you can see, we get an error. We get bot traffic detected. And what this means that it denied the request, right? So you get a 403 forbidden error. Right. So as you can see now, we're protecting against bots making this request. Now think about it. Certain web scrapers, you might want to protect your website against that. This allows us to go ahead and block those malicious requests if we don't want to allow that on our website, right? So very, very easy, and it's so simple to implement it, right? The next one is the rate limiting. So in this case, if we go ahead and click on rate limiting, this one is a little bit more intricate because we have some dynamic logic here. And essentially what we're doing here is we look at the rate limiting route, right? A couple of things to mention. This is a post request, firstly, right? We're sending an information to the user where we're basically making a request. This will be a post request. And then what we're doing is we have a logged in state here. Now this, you can essentially replace this with actual user logic, right? So this could be with, for example, Clerk authentication or whatever, authentication method that you've decided to implement. Here is where you would go ahead and get your user. Now, based on the user's state, what we can do is we can have two separate rules being applied. So in the first case, if you're logged in, we're more generous with your rate limit, right? We have the essential Arcjet client, and we're applying a rule. And in this case, we're using the token bucket rate limiting algorithm. And this essentially means that every single 10 seconds, we're going to refill 10 tokens. And we're going to have a maximum capacity of 20 tokens. That means that if every time that you made a request, it will deduct 5 tokens, and then it will only refill every 10 seconds at a rate of 10 tokens, right? So in this case, you would get a fair amount of use case, but let's say, for example, in the space of 10 seconds, if you made 4 requests, the 5th would get blocked, right? Until it would start to refill your tokens. However, anonymous users, we want to be a little bit stricter, right? Maybe we want to go ahead and give them a bit more of a stricter rate. So we're saying the interval still is 10 seconds. However, they're only going to refill at a pace of 3 tokens per interval. And the maximum they could ever have is 5 tokens, right? So in this case, they're going to get rate limited way quicker if you're not signed in. Right, so very, very straightforward as well. And you could even make it so that maybe it took more tokens per request if you weren't logged in. So genuinely could be very, very strict if you're not logged in, right? Now, I want to show you another interesting thing is that not only can we have this decision logic based on the Arcjet client, which will basically approve or deny the request based on the rules that we've applied, we also get extra information returned from Arcjet. This is really, really powerful because essentially what happens is we can have things like IP address analysis or VPN proxy detection. So you can go ahead and implement custom logic. Now, a prime example of this, if I want to say, where the user is located, but you could do this for many reasons, right? You could go ahead and block them if they're coming from a region that you don't want to support or something like that. But in this case, I'm going to show you an example of this. If you do test this locally, you will get an unknown, right? So in this case, if I was to do it on my local, make a request, you can see it's unknown location because it's doing it in a sense of based on your IP address. This is a local IP address and it typically is hidden on my machine. So in this case, this is why we're getting an unknown. However, if I was to tunnel through ngrok, so for example, this middle session right here, all I've essentially done is ngrok HTTP 3000. I'm tunneling it through this URL now. And this will give me a URL. So as we can see here, if I was to go and keep this open, I want to kind of highlight the importance of this now. So if we go into this URL, as you can see, I'm about to visit. Let's go past the security prompt. And now I want to show you, ignore that. That's from my own little extension. If we go into rate limiting now, as I click on make request, I want you to pay attention. It says, hello, United Arab Emirates, right? And as you can see, that's working perfectly well. Right. So, and even if I wanted to go ahead and console log the country here, we can go ahead and say that, let's just say country, like so. And as you can see, if I was to make that request another time, make request, you will see over here, country, United Arab Emirates on the server. So you can go ahead and implement any custom logic that you wish. And you can see we get the status 200 and the token logic is being refilled as appropriate. Now, obviously, if we're anonymous, so let's go ahead and I've simulated it on the front end to make it very easy to understand. But let's say we're not logged in. I make a request. You can see I have no more tokens available. So the next request I make, boom, I'm rate limited, right? So I keep rate limiting. Oh, no, I have to wait to 1 and then my tokens replenish. And can I do this? Yeah, no. You see, like even if I try and do it, I haven't got enough tokens. So I have to wait until all my tokens replenish because it's going to cost 5 per request. Now, if I make another request, it goes through. So this is really, really powerful. You can imagine you can use it in a number of different situations and use cases, whether it's a ticketing website, whether it's, high traffic websites, or whether you just want to protect your website against malicious behavior. Rate limiting, clutch. Okay. The next one that I want to highlight and demonstrate to you is the sensitive information, right? Sensitive information. Let's look at the route handler for this. I've got sensitive info route, right? So over here, again, I've explained everything to you really, really nicely. Here, what we can do is we can actually go ahead and enforce this. We have a post request and then we're saying sensitive info rule is being applied. And as you can see here, mode live, deny emails, credit cards, IP addresses, phone numbers. And let's look at what else we could potentially block. We could do credit card numbers, which we already have, email, IP address. So yeah, we've essentially got everything being covered here. So this is essentially what it's going to look out for. Now, what I want you to pay attention to is the same logic is exactly as is what I previously showed before, right? So again, when I mentioned a couple of lines of code, I really did mean it, guys. It's a couple of lines of code, super, super simple to go ahead and get set up. Now, what I do want to show you is on the back end here. So if I was to go ahead and close that, I want to show you the actual back end example. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the actual demonstration here. So this is what we have, the demo YouTube site. And if we were to go ahead and do an example now, so let's just say, I absolutely love the wireless headphones. I've given you a bunch of sample snippets, right? Now, let's go ahead and see if we wait a second. You see sensitive info was able to go through and we're in localhost 3000. So you can see we have a really nice handy dashboard here where we can see all of the information. But if I tried to do, for example, I included a credit card number in a chat, which was a big no-no. Let's go ahead and try that one. And boom, it blocked the request. And now you can see this is blocking it really securely. And it's worth mentioning, guys, all of this is happening on the Arcjet client on our server. It does not send this information elsewhere. It does not go ahead and, connect to Arcjet, one of their servers. It does it locally with the Arcjet client, right? And as you can see here, it blocks because of sensitive information. And if we look into this a bit more, you can go ahead and see a bit more of the reasons why. Credit card number even gives you the start and end position of the character. So if you want to highlight them, you can go ahead and do that yourself. We even have analytics over here to go ahead and give you a bunch of, useful stats and basically which routes are being hit, which IPs are coming in and getting denied. And then you can go ahead and handle this accordingly. So you can see this is a very, very powerful suite of tools to go ahead and implement, right? So this is fairly straightforward to go ahead and get used up. Now, this leads me to sign up protection. Now, this one I reckon is going to be the most useful for many of you out there. Now, think about it this way. If you've got a website and you've got an email address sign up form, you do not want to have millions of spam accounts signing up to your email form. You also want to essentially enforce things like rate limiting and a bunch of other things in that sign up form process. This could be very tedious, right? It can be a lot of steps. It could be a lot of moving parts. So let's look at how we can implement this with Arcjet. We've got a sign up protection route. And as you can see here, a post route, right? We simply pass through the email. So as you can see, an email is being passed through. And let's look at what we have here. So the protect sign up rule has a bunch of things inside of it. So we can do a bunch of cool things. Now you could do withdraw, and basically chain a bunch of rules. However, the protect sign up flow has been built to accommodate all of the common things that we would want to protect against, right? So as you can see, email validation rules. So we want to basically block temporary or disposable email services. So some people actually buy disposable email addresses. They will then sign up to our website and as a spam account, we want to block that. If they have no MX records, right? So if it's an invalid mail server, we want to block that because it has no benefit. We aren't able to reach that user if we need to. And also if invalid email addresses are shown, right? So we also have a bunch of other things that we can detect against. For example, here, we're not allowing any bots to sign up. And that's very powerful. If you think about it, you can easily create a scripting software, which is going to go ahead and sign up, and spam a website and basically try and take it down or just, cause havoc, right? So this is something we want to prevent against. And we can also implement rate limiting right out of the box. Now, when you see stuff like this, and you also see the chained rules that I mentioned previously, essentially what we need to start understanding is that it's really a powerful concept that we want to grasp. And this is what Arcjet's trying to do. They're trying to show the philosophy of defense in depth. It's not just, there's no 100% security approach, which is going to secure every single area. But what we can do is introduce multiple layers, which will make our app more secure. This is what we're trying to enforce. And of course, we want to focus on app development. We don't want to focus on every single corner of security. And then we missed 1% over there. Whereas there's companies out there like Arcjet, which essentially handle this for us. And again, all of this that I've shown you today is available on the free plan. So I will show you that afterwards as well. But let's give it a quick demo. Let's go ahead and say valid email right now. And as you can see, sign up is allowed. If we do a valid business email, sign up is allowed, right? And if we do disposables or invalid or missing formats right here, you can see it goes ahead and says, nope, you're not allowed to sign up like that, and disposable and no MX records. They'll even give you the reason why. So you can go ahead and refer that to your front end. So you can go ahead and tell them, yep, you're not allowed to do anything like that. And as I mentioned before, rate limiting and also bots. So bots, of course, you could simulate a bot request if you wanted to from a curl script. However, here, if I was to test the rate limiting, all this is going to do is going to try and sign this user up, let's say 10 times. So as you can see, look, it's just simulating several responses. And at some point, it will go ahead and it will block the user. So in this case, look, we hit our rate limit. boom, it's blocked. And now if I try and sign up again, my subsequent requests are going to get blocked until the rate limit expires. So in this case, after 10 seconds, we're giving them a fresh set of signups, right? So in this case, maximum 5 sign-up attempts per 10-second window. So you can really change it up as you wish. If you change this to 10 minutes, it's as simple as that to go ahead and change, right? So this, in a nutshell, is how you can go ahead and implement all of these features inside of your app for absolutely free with using Arcjet. And as I mentioned before, it's so simple to implement, which is why I took the time out to build this interactive demo so you can see for yourself how to go ahead and implement it. You can literally get the entire code base right now and basically use this as a template to get started today. I would also urge you to go through their documentation. They have really, really good documentation. You can also see a bunch of integrations. For example, Clerk. Absolutely love Clerk if you didn't already know. They work really well together. And an example here is rate limiting using the Clerk user ID. So as we can see here, I showed you earlier, when we initialize an Arcjet client, you can give characteristics, which is essentially the fingerprint of who the user is that we're tracking. And here we give a custom one for user ID. And then as we go down to our request, we can use the await current user method that Clerk provides. So we know if the user is there. And then if the user is there, when we go ahead and call the protect block, all we have to do is in the second argument, where we would typically say this is like 5 tokens or something, in some, for example, when we're using rate limiting, we just pass the user ID. Now it will apply all of the logic that we previously mentioned before, the tracking who's who, that kind of stuff based on the Clerk user ID, which is a really, really nice way of doing this. You can also implement it inside of the middleware. So as many of you know, when we set up Clerk, we set up a middleware step as well. So we can go ahead and check if the user is authenticated. Well, we can do the exact same thing here. This is the middleware that we set up when we use Clerk. And if we go down, what you can see is this is how we can chain the middleware together to go ahead and enforce it. For example, if we were to look down here, this is for the Clerk setup. Then we've got our Arcjet instance. So in this case, this is our base instance that we mentioned previously. So my one had no rules. However, they're saying all requests, we want to at least have a shield, which is basically going to prevent like SQL injection, which is a fair play. I would definitely say this is a very good way to go. And then what we can do is when we actually have our Clerk middleware run, we can go ahead and do the following, right? So we can go ahead and say, run our Arcjet client against the request that's being processed through. And if it was denied for whatever reason at the middleware level, we send a 403 and we deny access, right? Otherwise, we can go ahead and continue on with our Clerk logic, right? So super simple to get implemented. They also support a bunch of other popular, authentication methods, as well as integrations like LangChain as well, in case you're working with AI. So a bunch of cool stuff to go ahead and dive into. Now, of course, you're wondering, Sonny, what's the catch? How much is this going to cost me? Well, if you head over to the pricing section, as I mentioned before, you have a generous free tier, up to 5 rules, 3 devs. You have all of the main things that I talked about earlier. For example, geolocation, bot protection, validation for emails, rate limiting, and a shield, all for absolutely free. Guys, that's really, really good. Trust me. You can use this right now inside of your projects, and it has an incredible amount of use cases and an incredible amount of security for minimal effort. So as we mentioned before, you start enforcing that defense in-depth philosophy of making sure that at least we're trying to cover as much security as possible. And then of course, if you scale up or you want to get any more features, you can go ahead and upgrade as required, right? But as I mentioned, everything that I showed you in today's video is available with the free plan, and you can go ahead and get access to that right now by hitting the link in the description. And of course, if you go through that link, it supports the PAPAFAM a massive amount. So please definitely go through the link if you're interested in signing up with Arcjet. With that said, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video if you enjoyed this, so I can keep on making the stuff that you guys love. I would definitely recommend as well, when you're reading through the Arcjet docs, I forgot to mention, head over to the blueprints, and you've also got a bunch of interesting blueprints where you can go ahead and tackle some commonly approached problems using Arcjet as well. So make sure you go ahead and definitely check that one out. And as I mentioned before, guys, subscribe if you haven't already. So many of you are watching right now that are not subscribed to the channel, and it blows my mind. We're almost at 300,000 subscribers. Help us get over the line by simply hitting the subscribe button right now. As always, guys, it's your boy Sonny, aka Papa React, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.